Friends, good morning, and welcome to worship here, the People's Cathedral, the historic sanctuary of the Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Nathan Danis, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this very improvisational space this morning. I again apologize for the construction ongoing here in the sanctuary, as here we reach the end of the summer, and this is a major project that is going on here during the week, and it is moving at an impressive pace. The lighting and sound system is being completely updated, renewed, really taken out, and an entirely new system installed. You can already see some of the work that's been done, some of the new lighting installed. The old amplification system has now departed, and we are preparing for Celebration Sunday on this September 7th. And so I want to thank you for your patience with us as we complete this project. This project is only happening because of some incredibly generous financial support for this church and for this congregation. This is a project that has been dreamed about for almost a quarter of a century, for over 25 years, and it is now happening. And so I am so proud to see this happening while I get to be here with you. I want to introduce our guest musicians today. This summer we've had community musicians and guest musicians from around the state, around the country. And this morning we are blessed to welcome to our presence Calvin Van Zeitveld on the cello, and also Lemon Guo up there on the amplification and loop system. Welcome to Fountain Street Church. I encourage you all to read more about these amazing composers, students. The information is in your bulletin. And I want to again thank our principal organist, Noah Smith, for making this summer music program happen. After last week's worship, folks mentioned to me, I know I do reference a lot of books and quotes and poetry and other errata in the sermons that I preach, and folks are saying that they want me to cite my sources. That's good. That's very Fountain Street. And I completely agree. We're working on that. We are going to have an update to the websites, the bulletins, the chimes, and we'll get that information in there and out to you. But what's really needed here is for us to reassemble a communications team. The communications committee of this church was an important part throughout different parts of the life of this church in getting information out to people. They oversaw not just the bulletin and the chimes, but they also oversaw the church's outreach efforts to the community. And so if you are interested in being part of that team, we're getting it together. We're going to get going here pretty quick. So reach out to us at the office, send me or Cassie or someone an email, and volunteer to be a part of this communications program. Finally, I just want to remind folks that Celebration Sunday is September 7th. That's in 2 weeks. We will have all of this fixed and put back together again. And then we will welcome the choir back in for our worship service at 11 a.m. So please try to be here on September 7th to meet our new staff members, to celebrate the choir's return, and to launch an exciting program year together here at Fountain Street Church. We have a promise that we give. We pass it forward Sunday by Sunday into the future, and it is a promise that we can create peace here in this church and in our city, but also in ourselves, in our own hearts. And so we begin worship today with a word of peace. I'll offer a word of blessing, which you can return if you want, but then I want to encourage you to greet one another with words of peace and welcome, for all are truly welcome at Fountain Street. Friends, may peace be with you. Let's greet each other with words of peace. Friends, let's go ahead and join our voices together in singing hymn number 34. Hymn number 34, Though I May Speak. Amen. I want to invite all of the children who are here right now, here this morning, to come forward and join me up here on these steps, right here. I don't know if I should step in front of the speaker or not, probably not, but come here and sit on the steps right here. We're going to stay on this side for reasons I'll explain in just a second. Good morning. Wow, come on. Here we go. You're doing great. Awesome. Good morning. Welcome. Yep, there we go. That's why I'm going to stay there. Hello. There we go. Yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to go up here. You guys can turn around and look at me up here at the front. Can you see me? There you are. Good morning. We're all being, this is kind of like a camp out. It's really, it's exciting. This is great. Hey. I hope you all are having a good Sunday. Hi, can you see me? Look up here. Hey guys. What is it, like a quick question this morning? Do you think that we have rules for the sanctuary? Yes. Do you think we have rules for the sanctuary? We do have some rules. Oftentimes people think there's rules that we don't have. Some people think that you're not allowed to drink like water or eat food in here, and that's not a rule that we have. But we do have a rule. Like, do you think you're allowed to ride your dirt bike in the sanctuary? No. No? Surprisingly, there's no rule about that. You actually, there's nothing. I've looked everywhere, but what's this though? What's it? I know. We do have rules, though. Like, one of our rules is you shouldn't drive your construction equipment in the sanctuary, right? Now, that would be a crazy thing if somebody did that. Like, if somebody, like, drove a crane into the sanctuary, that would clearly be against the rules, right? I think so. Who put that there? That's unbelievable. I can't believe it. It's clearly against the rules. Do you think that there's a reason why it's here, though? I mean, yeah? What do you think? Yeah? Yeah, lift people up.
Fix the lights and sound way
Yeah.
there.
You can fix the lights and sound. You guys want to see something cool? You see those new lights, you see those round lights that are up there that are all sort of evenly spaced between the beams? Those are the new lights. Each one of those got put up there. And a person had to get into this crane and go up there, and then there was another person that was strapped to a rope hanging from a pole up there, and we prayed for that person the whole time that they were up there. That was terrifying. But they did. They changed all the light bulbs, and they're changing all the. You can't really see the new microphones that they're putting in, but you can see some of the new speakers up there. They're real thin, and those replace some other speakers. My point is that sometimes we gotta break the rules. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we gotta break the rules, don't we? Yeah. That just happens sometimes. Like, rules are just sort of, they're guidelines for what we do and how we act and how we behave, but it never hurts to ask why. My parents are going to love this one today. This is so good. And you're like my blessing. So when we see a rule, like especially if we have a rule that says no cranes in the sanctuary, we got to ask why. Okay? Why is it a rule? And usually, almost all the time, it's a pretty good reason, but it never hurts to ask why. So today, I was hoping for our blessing before character school. We just say this week we're going to ask why. Yeah? Yeah, why? I know you guys are good at that. I got 3 people in my house that love to ask why, but I think it's a good one, right? Okay, so go ahead and you can repeat after me if you want. And we can all be part of this before we go to character school. Here, repeat after me. This week, we'll ask why. All right, good one. You guys can follow the banner to character school. And yeah.
The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road was full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
Fountain Street Church, happy Sunday. Let us take a moment together now and quiet the stirrings of our hearts, quiet our minds, and seek together a common moment of silence and peace. I love that particular Mary Oliver poem that Jill just read so beautifully, The Journey, because it begins with counting the cost. Oliver's poetry is very liberating, I think, for people who have made it part of their own discipline or journey. It describes a world where we can be free, but Mary Oliver often loses me with some of her poems because they take away a lot of the time the sting of what it costs to be liberated. And so this poem that we just heard, The Journey, it counts the cost. It counts the cost. And it's why it is my personal favorite. It's one that I read to myself frequently. From the very beginning, she acknowledges the cost of liberation. The poem begins, "One day you finally knew what you had to do, and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do." Liberation is costly, or it isn't liberation. It's costly because peace is so often comfortable. Peace can be comfortable, especially for those of us with enough privilege, sufficient privilege, that we are so sorely tempted to cling to negative peace because we confuse that with freedom. We confuse it with liberation. This is a good moment in history to reread, if you haven't already, the Epistle to the White Church, as I call it, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. The preacher King writes, quote, "I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace to a substantive and positive peace in which all will respect the dignity and worth of human personality," end quote. Well, negative peace is comfortable for me, personally. And positive peace asks me to sacrifice that comfort. Last week, when I was preaching, I did my level and honest best to speak plainly to the importance of very small things, small acts of resistance, right? Because the tanks and battleships and armies of fascism will gleefully and mindlessly roll over a single protester standing in their way, no matter how fervently that single protester resists and shouts and stands their ground. What is needed, I said last week, was a million quiet acts of refusal. A million voices refusing to comply with a million small requests. And thank God for historians. Today, this week, our government is now preparing to send the military to occupy additional American cities, just as they did in Washington, D.C. And so the president has announced that he intends to activate and deploy the National Guard into several additional cities, and two things that history will record. And it was a historian that made me aware of this, that people may have been missing. And listen, I don't blame anybody for missing details about this stuff. So first of all, there's a lot happening, and second of all, we have a captive news media that's owned by a few loyalist billionaires, and the government is moving quickly. But Trump is only activating the National Guard militias in Republican states. And he is only sending them into blue cities and blue states. And he's sending them specifically into cities that are governed by black mayors, into majority black neighborhoods. And specifically cities led by black women, with black women mayors. In Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser, and in Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass. And then also next on the list is Oakland, Mayor Barbara Lee. Other cities preparing for military occupation today are Baltimore, Chicago, and New York, all cities led by black Democratic mayors. The government is tying these domestic military occupations to these so-called immigration sweeps being carried out by the administration's own paramilitary force, which are these thousands of new ICE agents that they've been recently hired and deputized. An army that will roughly be about 10,000 soldiers. This costs money. Raising an army costs money, so the Republican Congress recently voted to increase ICE's budget from $10 billion to roughly $80 billion. So there's going to be about 10,000 ICE agents supported by several thousand National Guard soldiers from states like Alabama, Arkansas, South Dakota, and with Texas deploying the largest militia, moving to occupy Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta. We are going to see protests, and we're going to see resistance. And understanding the difference between protest and resistance is going to be a make or break understanding. And so thank God for historians. Our historians are working overtime. I see it, and I'm grateful. Remember, there's a reason that authoritarians go after historians first, and they do, if you didn't know that. They go after the historians, and we wouldn't even know that they go after historians first if it wasn't for historians, right? That's why I try to get rid of them. So first against the wall under authoritarian regimes are four very specific vocations. Despite the words of the bard Shakespeare, he set forever on the lips of Dick the Butcher in Henry the Sixth. When he has that little schemer say, first let's kill all the lawyers. Right? They don't start with the lawyers. They start with historians and philosophers, and next comes comedians and the clergy. Tad Stormer is a scholar of American history at Johns Hopkins, and he is very specifically a scholar of resistance movements in the 19th and 20th century. Dr. Stormer studies the history of authoritarianism, and he details the strategies and tactics of recent history. And he's currently ringing every alarm bell he can find because this is an authoritarian regime. And there is not currently a mass resistance movement in the United States. There is mass protest. But he is hopeful, and I want to share some of that hope. Protesting is important. Protesting is important. But protesting does not stop authoritarianism. Resistance does. And just as massive protests are often loud and visible, resistance is often small and invisible. Dr. Stormer currently is on a tear railing against what he calls very safe and very polite idea that is being bandied about. It's this idea that if 3.5% of a nation's population participates in nonviolent protests, a regime will collapse. Like magic, I guess. That's not true. That has never been true. And in point of fact, the authors of the study that came up with that number of 3.5% have been desperately trying to correct the record about this. And of course. I mean, if you're at a protest in a city and the government, the police gave you a permit to be there, to hold your protest, and it all goes off without a hitch, I mean, come on. The 3.5 number was only ever meant to be descriptive, not predictive. And in most cases, when 3.5% of the population participates in some kind of temporary public protest, the regimes in power carry on as if nothing happened. And we literally just saw this in the United States. According to extremely accurate reporting from the U.S. government itself, just 5 years ago in America, in the U.S., 20 million people participated in the George Floyd protests. That's 6%. That was 5 years ago. And to a demand of defund the police. The police have never had more funding. Congress just turned on the money hose. What is needed, in addition to protests, is resistance. And resistance is absolutely terrifying. And historically, it is going to be unpopular, and it requires risk and sacrifice. Count the cost. Dr. Starmer cites an example of resistance today. His example that he gave in his most recent piece that I saw, it was the incredibly brave people in Los Angeles and in Washington, D.C., who are actively following ICE agents on foot or in their vehicles, following them and exposing them to the public, and unmasking them, doxing them on the internet, and then forcing them to relocate, to move hotels, forcing this Gestapo into the sunlight. And these agents must, in Dr. Starmer's words, quote, "Then, because of that, the agents must understand that there is a price to pay for hurting people and that masks can't hide everything," end quote. Today's lectionary text, the gospel lesson that's being shared in churches all around the world, because even though they all say that they are different from each other, they all use the same lectionary for the most part. The lectionary text is about Jesus healing a woman on the Sabbath. It's from Luke chapter 13. Jesus goes into a temple to preach, and there's a woman there with a flow of blood, and Jesus heals her, and he gets in trouble for it because it's the Sabbath, and you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, and that's the rule, and he breaks it. This is resistance, breaking a rule. The Jesus movement, in the context of the first century of Palestine under Roman military occupation, has been very well studied, and in terms of resistance and protest. There are a lot of great books out there. I recommend the work of Walter Wink. Walter Wink spent his life writing about nonviolence and the Jesus movement. This is Engaging the Powers, and they detail the strategies that these people used. Probably the most famous protest, right, at least the one that gets lifted up the most in churches, is Palm Sunday. It's the Palm Sunday protest. This was a major public event. It featured thousands of people voicing their anger and frustration. But it was followed by some very specific and very clever acts of nonviolent resistance. These were disruptions. The cleansing of the temple, where members of the movement physically entered the halls of power and overturned tables and drove people out into the streets with whips and cords. Well, that's what got Jesus crucified. Wasn't the Palm Sunday protest, was the temple resistance. It will be the uncomfortable acts of resistance that disrupts the regime's ability to carry out their plans. Protest is important, but resistance is the constructive force necessary for a positive peace. And this is a hard thing for comfortable people to understand, like me, especially in a city like Grand Rapids. If you're interested in local moments of resistance, you ought to read Jeff Smith's new book, The People's History of Grand Rapids. And then study this place here, Fountain Street Church. I'll give you one example that is near and dear to my heart. Most of you are probably aware that I recently accepted an invitation to join the board of directors for Planned Parenthood of Michigan. This is something I put a lot of thought into, and it's something I've been thinking about for longer than we've known each other. But in my own personal life, my own personal mission, I have cared about protecting abortion access for longer than any other political issue that I've ever cared about. And I've cared about a couple. This work is deeply personal for me. It's a generational mission. I'm building on my own mother's legacy and work that started in the 1960s. And so I'll start my work with Planned Parenthood on that board next month. But I think that you've got to understand that prior to the passage of Roe versus Wade in the United States, access to safe abortions was driven by resistance. And here at Fountain Street Church, there were both, but it was an act of resistance to create the Choice Fund, which still exists today. And it began by resisting, by quietly providing access, money, providing abortions to women in need safely, raising funds and connecting people to doctors in 1968, 5 years before the passage of Roe. That was an unpopular move. It was an unpopular move, and it cost the church. It cost the church dearly to do that. And it saved thousands and thousands of lives, and goes on today. In the coming days, you'll see protests. And the news media loves to cover protests. They're big and they're loud and they're a spectacle, and they're still important. They are important because they raise morale and they connect people to one another and they remind the world that hope is alive. But you'll also see resistance, and the news is not going to celebrate this. Resistance may be nonviolent, but it is not peaceful. Unmasking ICE agents, publishing their personal details on the internet, exposing them to the light of day is nonviolent, but it is not peaceful. Being an ICE agent is a personal choice that these people make and can choose to stop at any point, literally any time. So we will see resistance that is nonviolent, but it is not peaceful. A crowd of poor Galilean laborers marching into the Jerusalem temple with whips, destroying tables, scattering papers and coins and personal property everywhere, and driving the staff and the money changers out of the building into the streets. This is only violent if you believe that the money and the tables are people, and they're not. It's nonviolent, but it is not peaceful. No more negative peace. Negative peace festers like a hidden wound. Positive justice. Positive justice. Was Fountain Street Church a place of positive justice in 1968? I think so. I think so very much. Was it comfortable? I don't think so. It was nonviolent, but it was not peaceful. Well, you can ask them. You can ask them what it was like. Many of them are here today. Many of you sitting here were here. It was uncomfortable. No comfortable peace without uncomfortable resistance. No cheap grace, but costly sacrifice. And to what end? To what end? Okay. So last night I went down to Kalamazoo to listen to a speech for a candidate who's running for Senate here in Michigan. I try very hard to listen to every candidate who wants to become a Congress critter of some flavor. I like to listen to them all. They don't really do candidate debates anymore, so you got to follow these people around to figure out what they're saying. So I went and listened to Abdul El-Sayed. He's running for office to be one of the senators. He's got a lot of fans. He's a very charismatic person. But he's a doctor, and I was interested in listening to why a doctor would want to run for office. But he pointed out how strange it is that America is the only major country in the world now that doesn't provide health care to its people. The only one. And then it kind of hit me like a splash of cold water when I was listening to him saying this, because I'm just as frustrated as everybody. But maybe we're not the maybe we're not the only country who doesn't have socialized medicine. Maybe that's the wrong way to frame it. Maybe we're the last and final country who doesn't have it. Maybe we're the last. And so maybe the world is about to change. Maybe this is about something bigger. And so maybe this fight that we're facing now, here in America, in the United States, against fascism, maybe this is the last one. And maybe this country, the United States, maybe the same country that managed to put people on the moon, that managed to create the New Deal, maybe this is the country that will be the one that puts the nail in the coffin and finally banishes forever the spirit of fascism. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do for all of us, but for the world and for the children who are being born today. This could be the last one. And that is worth fighting for, I think, very much. That is a fight that is worth the cost. Amen. Amen. Let us give our hearts to receive this beauty. The work of this congregation sustaining this campus and sustaining the countless groups and movements that meet here is able to be done because of your generosity and because of the gifts that you invest into this church. I want to invite the ushers to come forward now to receive any gifts or offerings you've brought today, and thank you. Beloved, you have everything that you need. Let us go forth from here, hearts filled with courage, eyes open, ready to serve humankind. Go in peace. Amen.